Hi there, I'm going to do a review for Deep Impact. This movie came out in 1998 and represents the alternate ego of Armageddon. In the 90s, there was numerous disaster movies made, and there was always like two of them made from each company. A couple of movies have that monarch. Actually, there was a couple different companies that did a few different alter egos to each other. Ants and A Bug's Life are two. And of course, for asteroids and comets, it was Deep Impact and Armageddon. I think it was a couple years earlier. It was what? Yeah, there was also Dante's Peak and Volcano. But nonetheless, this movie here is well, as time goes by, this is turning into a vastly superior movie to anything that Armageddon could ever hope to be. Armageddon wasn't too bad at the start when it first came out, but as time goes by, it gets to be worse. It's not so great anymore. It's getting to be a lesser movie. Nonetheless, Deep Impact though is sort of surviving the test of time because it has things in here that just aren't in Armageddon. There's a lot of stuff in here that's kind of curious that they brought it into this movie. So this is a slightly more hard science fiction movie than Armageddon. Deep Impact is about the discovery of a comet. Not so much actually directly. The kid didn't know he was discovering a comet. He just happened to see something that was out of place. And the result is like basically have to go and figure out what's going on with it. Nonetheless, the directors of this movie is also not conventional. Female director Mimi Leder or whatever. And then you got big name actors like Robert Duvall, Tia Leone, Felicia Wood, Ron Eldard, just tons. Richard Schiff is in here. Heck, Jon Favreau is in here. It's just James Cromwell, Morgan Freeman. I don't know if these names were as big of a deal at the time as they are now, because a lot of time has passed. A lot of these names became bigger after. I mean, Elijah Wood at the time of Deep Impact was not a terribly well-known actor, and then a couple of years later, he ended up being in some little-known films called Lord of the Rings. And James Cromwell, I think, was sort of a big name by this time, but nonetheless, it's actually a relatively good film about the discovery of a comet by an amateur enthusiast astronomer. There's two of them. There's Leo Biederman. Elijah Wood plays Leo Biederman, and Lily Sobieski plays Sarah Hodgner. And nonetheless, discovery of a comet, and of course, one of the key astronomers on the ground, looking at this thing from the ground, of course, finds out it might be on a trajectory. Of course, this is a bit of a joke. In reality, he wouldn't be able to adjust that quickly for that. In reality, it would have taken weeks to determine the trajectory of the comet, potentially even longer than that. You can't determine the trajectory just from one soft spot, but nonetheless, it gets the point across is that he realizes he's got to call a command, and of course he rushes off and decides this is very, very important. I guess the only thing that's really fictional about this movie is the fact of how quickly he decides to get on this mission. Nonetheless, they make the discovery. The story ponders off, though, a little bit. Ponders off to a reporter who thinks she's coming off to a cover story about a senator played by James Cromwell, who sounds like he might be committing infidelity against his wife because the name Ellie keeps going around, and she finds this out. And of course, she thought this was a simple story. She's actually getting kind of concerned too because the Secret Service pulls her over in a rather awkward scene. But nonetheless, in a comedic moment, she finds out that, it's just the way that she meets the president, and at least she's like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting to see. She thought she's in real trouble, but then the president says some things that she's like, something's not quite right with the way you're talking. Again, yeah, the whole joke is she doesn't actually know what's going on, and they think she might know what's going on. So of course, when she responds in the way she does, it seems like she's playing her little game of like, okay, what's really going on? Because maybe I can catch up on this lead. But nonetheless, she ends up inadvertently finding out that ELE actually means an extinction level event, and that she's like, that is not what I thought this was about. And it ends up being a great little in joke that she suddenly realizes, oh, that's not. She suddenly realizes why the secrecy, why the budget flirting, why the president was there. She suddenly realizes everything. She's like, that's not good. This is not what I thought. Like, infidelity is one thing, a collision, of course, with a comet is a totally different story. Nonetheless, her father's also instated divorce. He's remarried. Well, he married a woman. And nonetheless, yeah, they go through all the trials and tribulations because they have to build us. They had been building a spacecraft to go and take on the comet. Of course, in reality, you wouldn't be doing it this way. But nonetheless, this is how they do this movie. This was the traditional method thought to go and be useful. I think nowadays, if we found a comet or an asteroid on a collision course, we of course would just not have a clue what to do about it. I think we'd be hoping it just didn't hit anything major. Honestly, I don't know what we'd do. I don't think we'd even be able to use solar sails. Any asteroid of any size that's going to be in a collision course, I think we basically saying our prayers after that, because I don't think there's much we could do. Using it, trying to send a spacecraft after it would be next to impossible. The way they show it in these movies, it's always a specially built thing. In reality, don't think there's a whole heck of a lot that could be done. Our technology is good for like things like space travel and visiting the moon occasionally. In reality, for doing commentary detonations, that is not what our technology is really good at. In fact, you'd be lucky if anybody actually survived within getting even within range of that comet. There's so much stuff that's going to fly off it. It's going to be huge ice chunks. Nonetheless, that's how they deal with it. They have to detonate a bomb. And nonetheless, they do all this stuff, and they realize it didn't quite work. So there's two pieces, and they're headed toward Earth. They don't know what to do about the smaller chunk, the bigger chunk. Yes, there's an idea. The other thing that happens is, of course, they find out that they don't have the fuel to get back. So, yeah. What happens with Elijah Wood then? His character? Well, he's the guy who found the comet, so he finds out he's a very important person. Nonetheless, he tries to get. Actually, the government's been planning on putting people on so-called arcs to go and into arcs, into little boulder, little areas to protect them from the effects of the comet for the next 2 years. So they've been putting people away. And Elijah Wood uses some of his prestige in order to marry his friend, who he thinks might be able to get on this thing. Nonetheless, it didn't quite work out that way. It's a really nice story, and the one thing they do well in this movie is they actually have martial law declared in this movie, which is something Armageddon is totally missing on. Deep Impact doesn't take the time to show martial law being declared and being an important scene in this movie, as it would be. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it now. It's a much better film. Like at the time, I thought those two films were roughly equal. Nowadays, not so much. Armageddon's kind of like that silly, stupid movie. Deep Impact, on the other hand, is this actually really thoughtful film about a commentary, discovery, and the decisions that humans make to try and get out there and deal with it. Nonetheless, the smaller comet does impact the Earth and produces a huge tsunami that travels through the Atlantic Ocean. We have this spectacular visual effects shot at the end of the movie where this indeed happens, and it ends up drowning out quite a few people, I would say. Yeah, it's I guess because it's in the concept of the commentary impact and what would have happened if the bigger one had hit. They kind of treat it as kind of like a mild comedy affair almost. I'm not sure. The way it's treated, it's too much to talk about. It'd be too much misery to deal with. Nonetheless, people in New York City gets inundated with the tsunami. Although how the tsunami comes into New York Harbor is completely opposite of how the real tsunami would enter New York Harbor, because New York Harbor doesn't look anything like that. And nonetheless, it's got some good sequences in it. It's got some really good thought put into it. I think the only thing it's missing is the scene where one of the there's one person. They decided the people in Washington, the news crew that sort of like Tia Leona was part of a news crew, and that news crew tries to straw straws at one point to decide who's going to get on the helicopter to go off and get away from this inundation of water. And the result is that nobody, not one of the men decides to give his straw to this person, and this ends up being a woman. And it's kind of a curious movie for that, but nonetheless, minor quibbles, relatively decent film, relatively decent enough make. It's it's not a particularly great film. If you want more action and adventure, it's terrible for that. Armageddon does do a superior job for action. If you want action, Armageddon is your thing. It does endless amounts of it. Deep Impact tries to keep it somewhat accurate. It's not that great, not terribly bad. Could use improvement in that area, but nonetheless, fairly good depiction of a meteor impact of the Earth, depicting everything from novice astronomers to the declaration of martial law. Morgan Freeman does play the president, and it's kind of amusing to watch this because this is quite a few years before Barack Obama was elected president. So I'm thinking that that this might have caused some minor controversy. I don't think this was the first time a black guy had been shown as president. So I think they kind of got away with it. And nonetheless, fairly good movie, pretty good commentary movie. It works. It's actually a really nice film after all this time to watch it over and over again because it does a fairly good job of establishing its point and purpose in life. And I think it has a really good comedy sequence. Nonetheless, there it is. There's Deep Impact.